With me now from Washington is Frank Gaffney, who's president of the Center of Security Policy, and Jack Caravelli, who was a former advisor to President Clinton. Frank Gaffney, first of all, when you saw those pictures there of the homecoming first, and obviously before that the pictures of the dear leader with President Clinton, what was your reaction?
Oh, I think any time innocent people are released from imprisonment by barbaric totalitarians, it's a cause for pleasure and happiness. It's just that when you buy their freedom, as Bill Clinton obviously did, by not only conferring his prestige upon one of the most horrific regimes on the planet, but I suspect also engaging with them in ways that have induced them to believe that there will be still more concessions made by the United States. No good can come of it. I think, in fact, considerable harm can be done. And that's why, as a general rule, not exclusively, but general rule, American governments of both Republican and Democratic stripes have tried to avoid negotiating with terrorists and their ilk, including Kim Jong-il, over the release of hostages.
Jack Caravelli, do you read it the same way, that actually concessions have been made and harm has been done?
Well, I don't know if harm has been done, but I'm not sure that much good has happened beyond the obvious pleasure and joy we all take in seeing the two hostages released. I think we have watched this movie before. I think, as Frank said, we know that North Korea is trying to, take credit for something it should not have done in the first place. But again, the overriding substantive issues remain on the table, and I think the challenge for this administration is to find a way to resume those talks and not have this become a PR distraction at the very least.
But Frank Gaffney, I mean, the ignoring of North Korea by President Bush didn't work, so perhaps another approach is only prudent. Nobody presumably thinks that in the 3 hours discussions did not take place about the future of North Korea in the world. But isn't that better in some way than pushing them so far to the edge their only reaction can be aggression?
Look, we'll have to see what the excuse me, what the effect of all of this is. I think that President Bush made mistakes. Ignoring them wasn't a good idea. Engaging with them as he did was not a good idea. I think what we should be doing is trying to bring down this regime through every way imaginable, including by impressing upon the Chinese, who essentially are keeping them propped up, that it is not in their interest any more than ours to ensure that a country like this, with a regime like this, with nuclear weapons like they now have, and ballistic missiles with which to deliver them, is anything other than a blight on the people of North Korea and the region, and quite possibly others beyond. This is the mistake, is that talks, I think, can only assure that we make more concessions, that we prop them up even further, and we perpetuate and compound the problem represented by the government of North Korea.
But Frank Caravelli, presumably with a new administration who no longer talks about either the war on terror or the axis of evil, that there has to be another way with North Korea. Do you take Frank Gaffney's line that you don't talk?
No, I do not take that line quite the way he does. But what I would add, and I think this is a dynamic that will play out in the months to come, I think it is quite clear that the current North Korean leadership, Kim in particular, is in failing health, if not worse. Perhaps we don't know the exact nature of the illness, but obviously his days would appear to be numbered. He does not look well indeed. But I think what we need to really look at, that I think goes to the heart of the matter raised by Mr. Gaffney, is simply that we may very well see, based on sources that I have talked to with some access to the North Korean society, that there may play out a dynamic in the months to come where the North Korean military it takes a more prominent role, perhaps, than it even does today in the political dealings of the nation, and that would always, serve to be another complicating factor. What we don't know is how that would play out, but we seem to make this assumption that there's a status quo with the leadership and whether we should talk or not, but I think as we look down the road, and perhaps not very far, that internal situation may change considerably.
Also, let's look to another country where there are Americans being held, and that is Iran. What do you think President Ahmadinejad will be thinking, Frank Gaffney, as he looks at these pictures of Kim Jong-il and President Clinton?
Well, I think he's read the Obama doctrine all too well. That is three-part: embolden our enemies, undermine our friends, and diminish our own country. And I think the net result will be perhaps an expectation that President Clinton will be sent off to Iran next. But it again is not going to conduce to security for all of those Americans who are now being made hostages, potentially to future hostage taking. And I think that may mean all of us in a very much larger sense than the individual cases we've been talking about today.
Thank you both very much for joining us from Washington.
Thank you.